program together for a 4-function calculator in Python. This is using some very manageable and somewhat basic coding techniques, and a little bit more on the somewhat, I wouldn't call it advanced side, but taking it to the next level on your journey to learn more about coding. So whatever position you're in, whether you already know how to code, whether you're just learning, whether you know nothing about coding and you're just curious to see kind of what's under the hood of Python and what makes these things work that we all spend so much time on, you're going to have a chance to do that now. Please make sure that you've downloaded the essential software that will allow you to code. If not, look below in the description. You'll see a link to the Getting Started video, and in just a couple minutes, you'll be up and running and able to start coding. So we're going to work on this calculator together, and you'll see that not only is it fairly simple, easy to grasp, but you'll also see that it's fun. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started now. Okay, let's learn how to code to create a 4-function calculator. So I've got the idle shell opened, which has been downloaded. You can see right down here the program, which I recommend you keep accessible, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. Idle shell is open. Now, just as a reminder, in case you've missed previous episodes, as far as downloading idle, for example, that is covered in a previous episode. There's a link in the description below to help you navigate to that Getting Started episode in case you haven't yet done these steps to get to this point. So once idle shell is open, you'll need to create a new program, which is simply File and New File. And then you'll name and save the file, and ideally, you'll save it to a place where you can easily find it later. So I've gone ahead and done that already. I've created a blank canvas that we're going to code from, which is called simply calculator. So let's go ahead and increase the size, and hopefully you can clearly see this. All right, let's get started. In fact, let's go to full screen mode. Okay, so in creating a 4-function calculator, first of all, let's go ahead and start with some notes at the top just for proper style. Let's go ahead and call this 4-function, please forgive my typing errors, 4-function calculator. Let's see, experimenting with Python 2021. And you can type whatever you'd like, and when you're done, you'll just want to close the 3 quotes, and this is where you can write whatever you'd like. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the program. So we're going to create this program using functions, and functions are really what drives programs in Python. Each function is really designed to do a specific thing, either return a value, for example, or to run a simple execution of some sort. Really, it's doing one particular thing. And so what we're going to do is create a calculator with multiple functions, really for the purpose of you learning what a function is and how to call a function. So to start with, I'm going to start with our main function, which is very important because that's really the core program that will run everything. And we're going to call it main. We've gone down 2 spaces, which is proper style. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is create something that's called a while loop. And the reason we want a while loop, it's a type of loop that will keep the program going. We don't want to create a calculator that once you command it to execute 2 + 2 and you get a result of 4 that it stops running. That's not too exciting. We want it to continue in a loop, meaning it will continue to let you run additional calculations until you're ready to quit. And so we're going to create a while loop. Now, a while loop, one way to do it is simply by identifying done equals false, meaning, is it done yet? Nope, it's not. You'll see false turns orange because that is actually a reserved word that is very important in Python. If we spelled false wrong, falsy, it wouldn't appear orange. So done equals false, meaning we're not done yet. And you'll see more about what we're doing as we get further into it. Okay, so while not done, so done is false. So we're not done yet, okay? That's false. While not done, meaning as long as done is false, we're going to do the following. If done becomes true, it's going to end this loop. So this is a while loop. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to define an operator. Operator is simply the plus, minus, divided by, etc. And Python does use some different symbols that you may be used to, such as times is not this, times is the asterisk. Okay, so we're going to basically call a function now. We want to call a function because we want to ask the user, what operator they would like to enter. Okay, so let's get the operator. So we're going to create a function called getOperator, but we haven't created the function yet. We're just mapping it out. And by the way, sometimes it's nice to use a flowchart to map this out before you start coding. Okay, so I'm going to have to create a function that's going to get the operator from the user. So that's one thing I need to do. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to go a few more spaces down, and we're going to create a function that will allow us to actually get the operator. So what we're going to do is we're going to define getOperator. Now you notice I'm using snake case. We can't leave spaces. That's not going to work out as defining a specific variable, because now we've got get and operator as two completely separate terms being used. So getOperator is the function we're defining, and that's why we're going to use the colon. So we're defining the function getOperator, which is being called in our loop down there, and we're back up here creating the function getOperator. Okay, so operator equals. So what we're doing, this is really no different than saying x equals 10. We're naming something that I'm just deciding to call operator because it makes sense. We don't want to call it x because it's kind of hard to know what x means if others are looking at your program or you are in 5 years. Operator equals input, and I'll explain this more in a second. Please enter one of, and this is in quotes. It's something we're actually going to be showing to the user. So I'm typing something the user will see. So I'm going to try to make it look halfway decent with some spacing and so forth. Okay. And we're going to allow, so plus, minus, times, divided by, and q, which we're going to end up defining as quit. And if only I can type correctly, as you can see, not always easy for me to do that. Okay, so here we go. Operator equals input. So we're defining this variable operator will be whatever the user enters. And this will be our display that the user will see when they're making this choice. A quick shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. For those of you that are not familiar with Skillshare, I can tell you it's absolutely awesome. I personally love it. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people like myself, and I'm sure like you as well. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. Skillshare offers creative classes designed for real life and all the circumstances that come with it. The lessons help you stay inspired, express yourself, and introduce you to a community of literally millions. I'd like to just take a moment and show you a class that I'm really into, Understanding Web Development, A Beginner's Guide to the Web by Christopher Dodd, web developer and educator. As you can see, there are 159 students watching the class at this very second. So you want to become a web developer, or at least want to know how the web works. I don't blame you. Web development is an in-demand skill that allows you to work from anywhere and earn a great living. And it's really true. When you think about this, learning web development opens so many doors wherever in the world you may be. Skillshare offers amazing classes, such as the one we're looking at now, which will help you to get up and running with this great skill set incredibly, incredibly fast. It's less than $10 a month for an annual subscription for a Skillshare premium membership. And I have some great news for you. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare premium membership. So instead of using a print command, we're using an input command, which is going to allow the user to see this and input something that will be identified as the operator. And now we're going to use an if command. If operator is equal to, so if we said operator is equal to 0, of course, it helps to spell it right. If operator equals 0, well, now we've just said the operator is 0. Whatever was input above is gone. We don't want to do that. We want to say if operator is equal to plus, there we go, or operator is equal to minus, or operator is equal to times, or, now we're kind of running out of space. You don't want to code all the way over and over and over. So we're going to simply use a backslash to move down to the next line and continue. Operator equals divided by, then, so this is an if statement. If the operator the user entered is one of those specific things, exactly that, then what we're going to do is return operator, meaning we're going to give operator back to the caller. So the caller is the main function that ran this getOperator function. It commanded getOperator to happen. It didn't send anything. It just initiated this function, and what's going to be returned is this variable operator, which is going to be named operator here. I could call this anything I want. It doesn't mirror this variable. It's simply what I chose to enter here. So a variable defined in a function is not also defined in another function unless you specifically name it. So I could just as well make this x. But I'm going to use the same variable name, which you can do because the function, once it's done, that's forgotten. What you return is what matters, and it's returned here, and I'm also calling it operator. Could call it something else, but to keep it simple, we're going to go ahead and stick with that for now. Okay, so what we've just done is created a second complete function, which is getOperator. But we're going to keep going just a little bit longer. So we're also going to do what's called else. So if the operator is one of those, plus, minus, times, or divided by, we're going to return that operator back to the main function. Else, meaning if it's anything else, like if it's z or 1 or plus space, or what if it's the letter Q for quit? So in that case, if it's anything else, we're going to force operator to equal Q for quit. And in that case, we're going to return operator. Now, once return is called, nothing below that happens. So up here, if I were to keep going with print something, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter because whatever I type here, it's not going to happen. After return is called, it's done. Any code below that is ignored. But because this is an if-else, once if runs, it's going to return this operator. But if the operator is not equal to one of these things we've specified, then we'll never get to this point. Instead, we go to the else. So if they enter anything else, the user operator is going to be Q. Why did I do that? Because I don't want to have to type in every infinite number of combinations a user could enter. So we're going to assume that if they enter anything else, this is just logic, anything else, we don't need them to type in Q. If they enter Q or anything else, let's just assume it's Q for quit. And we could get more fancy and use other options, but for now, this is, I would say, sufficient. All right, so now let's go back to the main function. Okay, so we just called getOperator. Now, if operator is not equal to, that's a sign for not equal to, by the way. Not is the exclamation mark. Well, I kind of wasn't completely accurate because that wasn't not equal to. That's not equal to. Need the equal sign. If operator is not equal to Q, you see what I'm doing now. So if it's not equal to Q, so in our loop, as long as the operator is not Q, so if the user typed in anything else, the operator is Q. And then everything below this is not going to happen. But if the operator is not equal to Q, then first number, because they're going to enter two numbers in this case, equals, Now we're going to have to enter a first and a second number. You need to know if it's plus or minus, etc. You need the operator, and then you need two numbers to make our calculator work. So let's go ahead and do the first number. So first number, we're going to do another function call. We're going to have to create a function. This is going to be called a float. A float means in Python, and I'm not coding right now, I'm just typing an example for you. A float would be 2.0. An integer would be 2. So in Python, a float has something after the dot. That's a float. This is an integer. We want a float because the user might enter 20.5 plus 2. So if we call this an integer, it's going to be an error because 20.5 is not an integer, it's a float. A float means that there is no more 2, but there is a 2.0. So we're going to call this a float. And in the float, well, we're going to trigger another function we're going to have to create. Let's call it operator 1. And we're going to call it with that symbol to call it. So basically, the float is going to be the outcome of this operator 1 that we have yet to define. And let's go ahead and run a second one so you'll see what I'm doing. Second number equals float operator. Let's just call it operator 2. We're going to call the function. Whoops. There we go. Okay. And I can see that I made a mistake, and that's why you might have heard it beep at me. There we go. We've got to call the function here. Operator 2 is getting called. But we don't know what these functions are yet, so let's go ahead and define them. So it doesn't matter what order these functions are in as long as they are listed before they are called. So if I have main up on top here, it'll never get to this. We'll get an error if we try to call functions that have not yet been defined because it goes top to bottom when Python's executing. So it'll read this function, but it's not going to do anything until it gets called, and it's getting called down here in main. Bottom line is your function should occur, they should be defined before you call them in your code. So we're going to go down 2 spaces for the next function, and we're going to define, and actually, I don't know why I used operator, I should use operand. Operand meaning the numeric value that's entered is the operand. So yeah, it's not an operator. Operand, okay. And as you're coding, you might end up creating bugs, as I have almost done, and hopefully you'll catch them early, if not later. And we may have more bugs that we'll find later. So, okay, here we go. So def operand 1. So we're defining this function. You'll hear it beeping at me as I mistype. Okay, so first operand equals input. Please, I guess we should capitalize this to be proper and polite. Please enter the first operand. And you can use other language, obviously, in the string you're creating here. So the user is going to see please enter the first operand, and they're going to type in whatever they'd like that number to be. Okay. And we're doing this one by one, just really as a learning experience. You could combine them, but it is also nice to have each function only do one thing. Helps with troubleshooting, helps with enhancement, expansion, and especially debugging. We're going to return something, otherwise the function does nothing. We need to give something back to whoever called the function. Who called the function? Our main function called it. So we're going to return the first operand. Okay, so first operand equals whatever the user inputs here. That's going to be something numeric, and we're going to return that, and whatever is returned, it's going to be equal to what we've just defined, the variable first number, where in snake case has to be that way. If you can't have just a space, it'll end up being 2 variables instead of 1. So this will be returned as first number, whatever was entered here, okay? So that's being returned. If there's no return, nothing happens. It's just kind of computer talking to itself. Okay, so let's define operand 2. We're going to define it. We're not calling it, we're defining it. Okay, so this is going to be second operand equals input. Please enter the second operand. And yes, you can use less fancy words. but it is an operand. So let's call it that for now. And we're going to return second operand. Okay. So now second number equals float, meaning we're going to convert whatever's entered. If the user enters 8, for example, it's actually a string right now. It's called a string, but once it gets called here, the second number, we're creating a variable, is going to equal the float of whatever this function called operand 2 returns. Operand 2 is going to return, if the user types in 10, there's going to be a 10 here, which is going to be converted to a float, which is going to make that 10 a 10.0, and it's going to be assigned a second number, which means second number will equal, if you were to do a print right now, which is a nice way to do debugging, you could do a print second number to test this, and you would get 10.0 if the user entered 10. Okay, so that's just to show you how that works. Okay, let's see what we're doing now. So we've got the if operator is not equal to quit. We're going to do these following things. So we have the first number, we're getting the second number, we've called them operands, but you see what they are. Okay, so now we need to know, is it plus, minus, etc. So we're going to continue here. So if operator is equal to plus, so we already called the operator up here, get operator, and that's where we now already know whether it's quit. If so, we're not going down further. If it's not equal to quit, anything other than one of these accepted 4 different options, plus, minus, divided, multiplication. Anything other than those will be defined as Q for quit. And if the operator is not Q for quit, these steps are taken. So, okay, back to here. If operator is equal, no, we didn't use one equal sign, because if so, we'd be saying operator, forget whatever the user entered, now it's going to be whatever we type. We want it to be instead, if operator is equal to plus, then what are we going to do? Okay, so if operator is equal to plus, we're going to want to add. So let's go ahead and print the result is, and you'll notice that's in quotes because that's what we're showing to the user. We can type in anything we want. First number plus second number. Okay, so it's printing the result. Great. Okay. Now we're going to use something called elif, which is kind of like else and if combined. It's somewhat simple, but it's important to use. It's a little complicated when you've seen it the first time. Else if. So if operator is equal to plus, it's going to print first number plus second number. Else if operator is equal to, let's go minus, then what are we going to do? Else if operator is equal to minus, we're going to print the result is, going to put a comma there, first number minus second number. So it's going to print what we have in quotes, followed by this mathematical outcome of the first number minus the second number. Okay. Else if operator is equal to, okay, what should we do next? Let's go ahead and do multiplication. So if operator is equal to multiplication, print the result is, yes, and I did see what you've probably already seen, which is a typo. The result is, and bugs are kind of a good thing. You'll learn a lot from the bugs. The bugs meaning the things that you might have done wrong, whether they be syntax errors or name errors or logic errors. As you test your code, you'll figure out what those bugs are. And debugging is a great way to improve. And as you can see, I've been catching some bugs as I go, and there may be more bugs that I won't catch until we run it. Okay, so we're going to do first number times second number. There we go. Okay. All right, so we got that. And then if operator is equal to divided by, now I'll show you why I'm doing this in a second. You're wondering why I didn't do another elif. If second number is equal to 0, there's a problem, which is if you divide a number by 0, it's going to create an error, a 0 error. We don't want an error in our application. So we need to address what happens if the second number is 0 and it's divided by. If second number is 0, we need a special way to address this. Print it is illegal to divide by 0. Now, it's not illegal in the sense that you're going to go to prison, don't worry, but it's illegal within the world of Python coding and mathematics. Okay, so we have that set up. Else, if it's not equal to 0, print, the result is first number divided by second number. Now I'm using proper form. You don't need these spaces, by the way, but it's just better to learn the right way first and include the spaces. It's just a style issue. It's called PEP8 and it's important. You can Google PEP, capital P, capital E, capital P. Of course, you can Google lowercase, get the same result, but it's called PEP8, PEP8 style. Quite common in Python to follow that style. Okay, so we're doing divided by. So what we've done is if the operator is, we didn't use an elif, we needed to be able to break this down. So instead we moved to an if divided by. If second number is 0, we're going to print it's illegal to divide by 0, and we're going to move back out here. Otherwise, if it's not equal to 0, it's going to print the result is first number divided by second number. Okay, we're pretty much finished with this. Now what we need to do is go out to what happens. Okay, so this is our while loop. Done equals false. While not done, operator equals get operator. We're calling these functions. If operator is not equal to q, it's doing these. What if it is equal to q? If it is equal to q, we're gonna close this loop. We're gonna kill the loop. If it is equal to q, then done equals true. We're done. So this loop is happening while done equals false. As soon as done equals true, so while done's false, the while loop is ongoing. Once done equals true, it's going to terminate the loop. So if operator is not equal to q, this is going to happen. Once it is q, in other words, the user inputs something in our functions for operator other than plus, minus, times, or divided by q, or whatever else they enter. What's going to happen if they enter anything other than these? If they enter these, it's going to return the operator to where it was called here. But if they enter anything else, operator is going to get assigned q automatically. And if q drops down here when it was called get operator, then if operator is not equal to q, this runs. If operator is q, then it's not going to follow these steps. This whole block's going to get skipped. Instead, we're going to go to the else, done equals true. That means there is no loop, done equals true. And then let's go ahead and close out in an elegant way by printing something. And whether we call it playing or whatever, that's done. Now, there's something else important we have to do. We have to call this function because nothing's going to happen when we run this. This main function hasn't been called yet, and we can't type it anywhere we want. That's not going to work. What we need to do is go down 2 spaces and call the function like this. And there it is. That is our program. Let's see if it works. Let's hope for the best. I can't guarantee anything until we run it. Here we go. Must save it, yes. Okay, so far so good. Now it's running in the shell. So we created a file, which we saved and we ran it by running module. And now we're in the shell where it's being run. Please enter one of plus, minus, etc. Now what I want to do, I think this would be helpful to you, is I want to show you our code while we're running it. And so I'm just going to put our code here so you can kind of see what's happening when it's happening. And you can keep in mind the first part was ignored, and now we're down here. The functions were defined. They were not called. They were called not till we get here. You can call other functions in functions. We didn't need to do that. These are functions. This is another function, def main, and this is the function that was called. So when I ran this by going to run and run module, what happened is the first thing that happened is operator equals get operator, which ran get operator input. Please enter one of, which we're seeing here. So let's enter plus. Okay, so now that we've entered plus, please enter the first operand. Let's say it's 10, second operand 30. Well, we should get 40. The result is 40.0 because we identified it as a float, not an integer. If it was identified as an integer, it would have just come back at 40. Because of it's a float, there's a decimal, 40.0. If we define it as an integer, the problem would have been if someone typed in 10.5, we'd have an error and the program would crash. So let's go ahead and do divided by 20 divided by 0. Oh, it's illegal to divide by 0. Okay, let's do times 50.5555 times 75 point whatever. The result is, there it is. Let's do another divided by 500 divided by 2. Okay, 250. And it will have the point afterwards because we've made it a float. Now, if we want to quit, we could type Q, which will quit, or we can type anything else, which will also cause it to quit. Why? Because we set it up that way. Thank you for playing quitting now. So let's run one more time. And I just want to get it a little further down. So if we do divided by first operator, second operator, so 10 divided by 90, what's that going to be? Okay, there we go. And let's again try something else. 100. Oops. If I type in 100, it's going to quit, right? Yep, because it's not a Q. So let's type one more time. Let's try this. 100. Oh, start with minus. 100 minus 10 should be 90. Okay, so that's basically it. Now, when we look at our code here alongside our program, you can kind of see what's happening. When you define main, which is the core program, done equals false. While not done, this is the while loop, all this is going to happen. It's going to call the get operator function, which goes up here. It asks us to input one of these, which is a string. That's what it's called, a string. It could be an integer or a float, but this is a string. Why? Because it's in quotes and we're asking something. It's being entered as a string. This is just going to be an input as a string. If the operator is plus, minus, times, this is just a continuation of the next line, or divided by. And you do that because in Python, part of the style, Pep8 style, you don't want to go too far over. It'll work, but it just becomes messy, hard to debug, and not pretty to look at. So it's going to return the operator, which is going right to where it was called, get operator. So operator now, once we typed in plus up here, once we typed in plus up there, what happened when we typed in plus? When we typed in plus, the operator equaled plus. If we were to type print operator and we ran the program, it would have printed plus right after that. If operator is not equal to Q, it's going to do these things. So when I typed in Q, or the operator is any random thing I want to type in, then we're up here in the get operator. Operators, anything other than these, it's going to be assigned to Q. So if you enter something else here, 1000 or A or Q or whatever, capital or lowercase q, by the way, Python is case sensitive, just want to emphasize that. Again, it's important. So capital Q, lowercase q, 1, 2, 3, whatever we enter here as the operator, if it's not one of these specific named strings, plus, minus, times, or divided by, then it's going to be something else. Operator will equal Q. If you were to print operator, it would print the letter Q. So then we go back to function. Operators now defined. Let's say it's comes back as a Q because the user entered something other than what we were hoping for in these various operators, plus, minus, times, divided by. So if it equals Q, well, if operator is not equal to Q, do this. If operator is equal to Q, we go from here to the same level, else done equals true. Done equals true, so the done loop, done equals false, while not done, does this. Once done is true, boom, it's done. Thank you for playing, quitting now. Otherwise, it goes through here. Hope that was helpful. We've created a for-function calculator. You can play with this. You can change the wording. And I think what you can do is apply this to some other types of programming you may be interested in doing. It doesn't need to be a calculator. You can use the same structure to create lots of different types of programs. It may be a program to calculate your grade point average. It may be a program to figure out the dimensions of a square. There's just a lot you can do with it. Hope you found this helpful. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and post those in comments, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right, so that's it. For-function calculator. Not only do you know how to now code for this particular purpose, for-function calculator, but you can apply what you've learned during this episode to create other programs with similar functionality, but with different outcomes, with different inputs, with different parameters. And I hope you can take it a bit farther and play a bit and get a little creative and come up with your own ideas using this basic for-function calculator program structure to do something completely different, but following the same guidelines. Thank you so much for joining. Please take a moment to click subscribe, the bell, and all for notifications. Look forward to sharing more soon. Wish you the best. Take care. Goodbye.